Miss Edlin and Miss Richardson are under the weather and will not be here this evening. So we have three here. Mr. Brand, instructional update.
Thank you, sir. My wife is under the weather as well, so I have the littlest broom with me, so if a little visitor walks in, I apologize. Sometimes she likes to hear my voice and wonder what's going on. So we'll be pretty quick and swift here this evening. First thing we wanted to update you on is the Comprehensive District Improvement Plan. So every month we show this, which is the overall plan with our objectives and our critical initiatives underneath. We adopted this last year with the goal and the design to be that this would be the shell of our plan, really the heart of our plan, for the next 3 to 5 years. So this would be year 2 of that cycle. And then we align strategies each year to go with those critical initiatives of the big boxes that we're working on within the district. So there's the overall plan again that we look at every month and is available on the website all the time. So the public can always access that on the district website. This is our committee for this year in terms of reviewing that plan. I'll leave it up there, but you can see the left is the membership of that committee. That is actually in statute, the different members that need to be part of your CDIP committee, and then those are the representatives that serve on the committee from our community and throughout our district. So you can look at that, and again, this is all available online. This entire organization document is available online as well for the public. So nothing on this is not accessible. So anything on here anyone can access from our district website, as well as we put it out on Facebook last week as well. So all of this information and the links to this page. So you can see kind of the schedule. We met for the first time on the 30th, where we reviewed data from the past CDIP, so from the 2019 calendar year CDIP, and the strategies, and we went over each strategy and marked progress on each of those strategies. Then we looked at just high-level data for our district. Mainly the district report card data, which is our end-of-year state assessment, and trend data for that. We also looked at Elliott data, which is our classroom observation data. And through discussions from that November 20th meeting, we also looked at some mental health data from across our community, and that's what that ISF data. Again, all linked on here and all available to the public online. What we do now is from October 31st to November 20th, we ask the committee to go out and talk to the people that they represent on the CDIP committee and start generating activities and strategies that they feel like the district needs to focus on for the 2020 calendar year. We'll come together in November, analyze those, start to prioritize those. We generally, in doing this, have asked that we don't have more than 5 or 6 activities on the CDIP each year. Not that we'll only do 5 or 6 things, but we feel like once you get beyond 5 or 6 big activities, you start to really water down the focus, and it starts just being a smattering of put anything on there that you possibly might do over the next year, versus focusing on the areas that the community and the stakeholders represented there feel are important for the next 2020 year. So that's what we'll try to hammer out the 20th, then we'll get back together in December and hopefully have a draft to approve so that we can bring to the board at the December board meeting the proposed CDIP for 2020, which the board then approves or sends back to us if they would like different adjustments made. So any questions on the process of the district improvement plan?
No, and just to clarify, I've served on it a few times. The goals and the 5 or 6 activities that you come up with, they are things that sometimes require financial commitment, and so these are the overall district goals that we feel like we need to work on that are most important, and sometimes there is a financial cost associated with those.
Yes, ma'am. Yep. Okay. So there is our from the past, so support services. So we'll continue to work in that area there with the create and implement a system of student supports. We talked about the cross-agency partnerships as we continue to work with the city and county on being more intentional about those. The committee was kind of lukewarm on whether to leave that on. We know that that's in process, so it's not something that's going to fall away. The ball has started there. So that may or may not remain on the CDIP for 2020 for the committee recommendation, as that is in the works. The special education facilitated self-assessment has been completed, so that obviously will move off this year. Both of these activities we feel like are likely to remain on here, possibly with some wording changes. The feedback from the committee at the time was we continue to have that same need to recruit and retain staff members. That continues to be an issue definitely across the state, but nationally as well, with numbers of applicants declining, that it becomes more and more important that we're intentional about recruitment, diverse recruitment, and looking at strategies for that. And then, of course, retaining our teachers is very important so that we don't have to recruit as many each year. So there could possibly be some wording changes in that, but I think that'll probably stay the heart of that objective. Technology, it'll be interesting where we go with that. We've knocked both of these out. I would say this is a great example of why we do the CDIP process the way we do. This was brought to us in that last meeting for CDIP approval last year, and after the committee really spoke, it was realized that there was universal agreement that we needed to do more in terms of utilizing technology, making sure we're teaching our youngest students the proper way to use technology, and then helping our teachers to use technology in continuously better ways. And so this was added just last year from that committee, kind of the last day. Ms. Springett, I think you were at that meeting, and that was very much recognized as a need, and we have done a lot of work with that this year already. So those two will probably come off. We'll see if what strategies the committee would possibly like to work around in terms of that technology initiative. And then, of course, the last one is the facilities need, which is provide facilities that allow teaching and learning to match local college and career needs. That was a request from the CDIP last year. With what they're asked for was what was the plan moving forward. And so discussion with the CDIP team was, they possibly could have additional activities with that, but feel that they're aware of the path moving forward right now to make sure that there's a high school that meets those needs. So that probably strategy as it's written there will not be recommended to stay on. Any questions with that?
No, I mean, I just think it does bear saying that having a good CDIP plan in place really does guide the district, and I think goes a lot towards the evidence of a district that's doing well with gap populations, with just all different kinds of things. If you look at what those goals are and those objectives and what we're working towards, and really valuing in that process, that it really is clear that those are things that we talk about each month as the district grows stronger and is able to make progress. So thank you.
Last thing I'll update on tonight, and I apologize that font looks a little wonky up on that screen. But the equity and achievement team continues to meet. So we've been meeting for about a little bit over a year now. You can see the committee membership of that team there is off to the left, and the norms and the goals of that team. But we did have that timeline of, I feel like I'm causing that feedback if you can't. Back in May, Bob says I am. Back in May 2019, the board approved a RFP from Whatever It Takes Consulting to complete an equity audit. In September of this year, that audit was conducted over 4 days within our schools. All of our schools interviewed over 80% of all of our teachers, interviewed students, looked through a plethora of artifacts and data. And then in October, mid to late October, released the final report. I worked with that equity and achievement team twice, actually, completed that work this Saturday to come up with an action plan draft that we plan to present to you all at the November 18th meeting. We want to finalize that draft a little bit more on our meeting next Monday before the board meeting, as well as the CEO of the company of Whatever It Takes will actually be here to answer any questions and present to you all as well, assuming that that's something that you all would like on your agenda and hear from her. She has offered the opportunity to do that at that meeting, and then we should have that draft plan for you all to review at that time. Questions?
No, but I would comment that I ran into Larry Blackford, and he was very complimentary about the work that you have achieved on this team, and feels like you guys are coming up with good steps, and was very positive about it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really it's been a tremendous team of very invested, passionate individuals, which make a lot of difference. Yeah.
Well, I definitely think it shows that our district is valuing and putting the time and the resources into just different groups and what we value and what we think is important. So I can't wait to see the audit, and hope it has some good recommendations that we can kind of, as a board, be able to implement.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go now to our regular agenda. Superintendent has one item on there that needs our action tonight. Superintendent Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. We do have one action item this evening, and that is a travel request for our FCCLA club from the high school. And do apologize for this being late to you all. It was an oversight. And so we have spoken with folks at the high school to ensure that this doesn't happen again. But we would ask for your approval of that trip.
Any questions of the superintendent?
No, but I would just comment that I do think that sometimes happens, and I appreciate you all not saying, nope, sorry, you didn't get it in in time, the kids just don't get to go. I think, having a little bit of flexibility is a good thing sometimes, so I do appreciate that. I think we're all human, so, yeah.
Is there a motion to approve the travel request?
So moved.
By Ms. Springate, is there a second?
Second.
By Ms. Bradley, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll now go into our planning session. Ms. Smith, would you like to go over your report, your summary?
So you should each have a copy of our October 31st financial summary. This is our cash balance report by fund. Our general fund beginning balance was $4.3 million. Our revenues for the month was right at $1 million. Our expenditures were $2.3 million, and our ending balance was a little over $3 million. We have had these discussions over the last few months, and I just want to highlight the fact that we are at the point where we have found the need to use that contingency budget to get us through these first 5 months to offset the debt service payments that we have. As we go down, you're going to see that. We actually dipped into that a little bit last month. If you look at the beginning balance for October 1, we were at $4,342,000, and our contingency is $4,388,000. So creeped into it a little bit last month. Definitely creeped into it a little bit more this month. And as I've said in the past, a good number to think about as far as our fund balance usually is that October 31st number, because we are not 1/12 of an operational type entity. We do not get our primary revenues until November, which we have received. We received them last week, so we'll definitely recover, but I just wanted to highlight that. Our special revenue fund, we began with $63,000. Our revenues $290,000, expenditures $271,000, and ended the month with $82,000. Our district activity funds, we began with $323,000. Our revenues $87,000, expenditures $71,000, and ended the month with $639,000. Within this fund is where we account for our one-to-one device insurance. We began with almost $57,000. Only had $566 in revenue for the month of October. Had almost $8,000 in expenses, and ended the month with $49,500, almost $6,000 for the month of October. Our school activity funds, we began with $282,000. Our revenue $71,000, expenditures $69,000, and ended the month with $283,000. Our capital outlay fund, we began and ended the month with $180,000. There was no activity in that particular month. Our building fund began and ended, as there was also no activity for the building fund in October, of a negative 1.9, as I referred to before. That is our debt service payments that have been due since July 1st that have accumulated, which that negative will disappear on our November financial statements. because now we have our revenues for that fund. Our construction fund, we began with 1.4 million. The only revenues for the month was the required interest on our 2 SFCC projects of 2,000. Our expenditures 103,000, and we ended the month with 1.3 million. As I said before, there were no debt services payments, so there was no activity in that fund for the month of October. Our school food service, we began with 282,000. Our revenues 218,000. Our expenditures 186,000, and ended the month with 315,000. Our daycare operations, we began with 137,000. Our revenues 53,000, expenditures 43,000, and ended the month with 147,000. Our community ed fund, we began with 36,000. Only had $455 in revenue, a little over 3,000 in expenditures, and ended the month with a little over 33,000. For a grand total, we began with 5.5 million. Our revenues were 1.7, expenditures a little over 3, and ended the month with 4.2 million. Again, and that's cash in bank as of October 31st. Are there any questions?
So on tax, go ahead.
Go ahead, no.
So you said you did receive taxes last week.
Mm-hmm.
Will that, I assume, continue to kind of trickle in, or is
Yes.
it, how long does that last?
We normally will receive some fairly good payments between November and January. It will significantly drop off in February and March, and it's very little as far as property taxes beyond that. Most folks pay by that February-March time frame. But the majority of it is received between November and January. Well, the majority of it received in November, but because most people take advantage of that 2% discount. But you know, we will still receive some fairly good payments in December and January as well.
And the only other question I had, on just a question on the daycare operations, on the expenditures, is that primarily salary?
Yes.
Okay.
Salary, and they do provide afternoon snacks for our our ETC students, and so that's your 2 primary expenditures in that fund. Did you? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know I always bring up this negative balance because I just worry. So just to be clear, that's negative until we get the current taxes to pay for it. So we're carrying that out of our just general fund. And as long as we have a couple $1 million in the general fund, we can cover that. But if the time comes when we've spent that couple $1 million out of general fund and, you know, say we've used contingency for 1 year, and that's just the one-time money, when it's gone, it doesn't go back in. And currently, we're not putting any in contingency, we're actually taking out of contingency, it sounds like. So, you know, if, say, next year we have this negative balance again this time of the year, it looks like we would probably be able to cover it. But what about further down, like year 2 or year 3? If we don't have that money in general fund when we have the bill due, and we don't have our taxes until after we receive the bill, so we have that negative on there for a couple months, how will that work?
Well, you asked me a similar question, I guess last month, and it was specific to not actually having enough cash in bank, and I responded that if we got to that situation, I have known districts that have had to take out short-term loans to cover those debt until they actually get their revenues. The likelihood of that happening to us, if we proceed and were to sell bonds for a new high school, we're going to have cash in bank, but we're still borrowing from something. We may be borrowing from ourselves. If you take all of these other funds and we have enough money, but the cash flow and managing and monitoring that is an intense process to make sure that we do not dip. I mean, we cannot operate with a negative cash balance, obviously. So
And
it's
some
just
districts have
something.
done that before, I guess. Is that when the state comes in and takes over management of the district if you have a negative balance, or how does that work?
The state management doesn't happen if you have a negative cash balance at one, on October 31st. What they are looking at mainly is if you dip below a 2% contingency, your ending balance is less than 2%. They're going to be strongly looking at financials and considering a level of input from the Kentucky Department of Education.
Okay, and
to
we're
the school
okay on our
districts.
contingency right now, but we are dipping into it currently. And then last year, just as our general fund, our expenses, or we had a loss of around $1 million. So
I mean, last
now
year,
we're okay
today,
okay.
right, last year, October 31st, 2018, our general fund cash balance was in that $4 million range. Now it's a little above 3.
And historically, in the years that you have been here, how often has there been a negative in October balance that you have to then?
We have not had a negative.
I don't mean a negative cash balance. I mean a negative in like the building fund in October, waiting for that.
Every
tax.
year.
Every year. So this is not an anomaly.
No.
Okay.
But usually we have $1 million more to cover that last year at least.
We usually,
And then, yeah, so I just think it bears caution that we operated at $1 million loss last year when we put aside around $1 million to restrict for the school. So when we put that aside, we took it out of here. So then now it's gone because it's been committed. Before it was just sitting there. When we did the BG1, it got spent. So we can't use that anymore. So I just wanted to be sure. Right now on contingency we're fine, but we're dipping into it. Right now on general fund we're fine, but we're dipping into it. So that is just a trend that we've not seen before in Woodford County since I've been on the board.
Ms. Smith, when do you foresee the state coming in and taking over?
Hopefully never.
hopefully never.
Because this is the first time
it
I've
would-
ever heard comments from our CFO about state taking over and stuff.
I would definitely strongly recommend other measures to avoid that as we go along.
Like what measures are you referring to?
One measure would be to continue to take the 4% tax rate. That's the only way we really have to generate additional revenues to offset recurring costs and the cost of our salary schedule that we currently have that includes step increases for our staff. So making those recommendations and closely monitoring this cash flow and balance. Another measure, depending on the severity, may be a recommendation to consider cutting costs. So I would definitely anticipate those recommendations happening before I would just allow this to continue down this path.
But once again, this is nothing new. You and the superintendent have recommended we take the tax increase every year.
That is correct.
So, I mean, once again, this is nothing new.
That is nothing new.
Right.
That is correct.
Right. But the talking of the state taking us over, that is new. I've never heard that before.
I guess the first time it came up, was last month.
Okay.
I think you're just answering my question. I don't
And
think
just
she's
answering
making
the
any
question.
threat.
Yeah,
I want to know where we
I
are.
was not indicating that I felt that was in our immediate.
But I think we should be cautious when we make those kind of broad comments, if we don't think that's really a possibility. That's just my thought on that. Talks of the state taking over and bankruptcy, I just think that those are inflammatory.
Well, and in my defense, I just asked the question because I want to know. I don't feel like a good defense, like 3 years from now, if that happens, is, well, why didn't the board even ask? Like, I want to be aware of what these things mean when we operate at a loss and then we restrict money. And then last meeting, if I'm correct, what I heard was we took the 4% tax rate and we got that in November. However, that's already spent on reoccurring expenses. So that leaves 0 for raises, 0 for if we have pension increases, 0 for if the psych hospital comes in, 0 for if we have any capital outlay projects, which we do every year, 0 for if the state budget comes in and there's a mandatory raise that is not funded. I just want to understand the big picture.
I understand.
Not that I want people to be scared
No,
or
but
afraid, but I want to have an understanding, because as a board member, I feel like that's literally my responsibility.
No, my comments were not directed towards you, they're directed toward Ms. Smith.
Well, but again,
Can I
though,
finish?
she was answering the question. And so I don't think it's fair to say that she's the one that is making a statement out of the blue about a takeover or anything along those lines. She simply answered a question, at what point would that occur? And she answered that question. So I don't think it's fair at all to paint that on her.
You have anything else? I'm not going to interrupt you. Do you have anything else? Okay. Right. But back to the positive. We have always patted ourselves on the back. We have always proclaimed that. You have always bragged about one of your positive results is the great financial situation that we find ourselves in. I've heard you use the phrase many, many times. We in Woodford County are fortunate because of the work that you've done and the work that Ms. Smith's done and the work that the board's done, is to have a great financial situation. Is that not true?
Yes, we have worked, I think, extremely hard to put ourselves in a very safe financial position. That can change very, very quickly.
Are we still, do you continue to say that we're on good financial?
I think our trend is in a very negative direction right now.
Why is that?
Because we are down $1 million, and our expenses exceeded our revenues by $1 million, and it's very probable that that will be the case again this year. So that is a negative trend when that hasn't happened before.
What caused that trend?
Well, I think there's a variety of.
Well, can you share them with us?
Well, one is that we did restrict $600,000 out of general fund. We did restrict capital outlay dollars.
Did we take? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So if you applied the $600,000 to the $1 million deficit, and if we had the capital outlay available for the projects that we did last spring, the deficit would have been around $150,000 to $200,000 instead of $1 million.
How much money has been taken out of the general fund? You keep saying we took $600,000 out. Can you?
$600,000 was restricted from the general fund.
But that was new.
And moved into the BG one.
Yeah.
I think getting caught up on if it was
Excuse
new
me,
or
though,
not.
can I finish? You keep, I know you're trying to paint a picture. I understand that. You keep acting like the board reduced general fund revenues, existing general fund revenues, by $600,000. Is that a true statement?
We have $600,000 less in general fund revenue today than we did last year, yes.
Where did the $600,000 come out of the general fund money?
The additional, well, it exceeded, the $600,000 actually exceeded the new revenue that was generated last year by the 4% rate. So every bit of that new revenue that could have been applied toward those expenses last year.
Could have been applied. It's much different than taking away. Am I right about that?
Well, those expenses were approved prior to the restriction.
You're talking
so
about-
they could have applied toward that.
My question is about revenues, not expenses. How much, that $600,000, are you telling everybody here tonight that $600,000, that you have taken $600,000 out of general fund revenue?
$600,000 has been removed from the general fund and restricted.
How has
Yes.
it been? We enacted a tax that generated X amount of dollars. We could either put that in the general fund or we could restrict it
So it was removed from the general fund and restricted.
Mr. Hawkins, how can you say that? And did it ever reach the general fund?
It may have prior to it being restricted, because the budget was submitted that showed that money being moved.
Listen to yourself. You said it may have been restricted because it never got there.
No, it was restricted.
Yes, but it never got to the general fund. There was no money taken away from the general fund that year.
If you look at our revenues, based on the tax rate that was set last year, our general fund had $600,000 less revenue than it would have had.
But it had the same amount that it would have had the year prior if the tax hadn't been enacted. I believe that's what he's getting at.
And
So
also,
if the 4% hadn't been taken, the amount would have been the same.
No,
Well,
that is not true.
so you're saying if the compensating rate,
No, if the compensating rate had been taken, our revenues would have gone down. Had the rate been left flat, we would have generated some additional revenue.
sure.
Okay, so that revenue that we had budgeted for was removed, and then the additional revenue that was generated from the 4% tax was removed.
So
So our general fund has $600,000 less revenue in it today
then what you
than it did
projected.
last year.
yeah, I think like
Right,
I think
but-
we're getting caught up in what could have been or what should have been or what didn't happen or did happen. The bottom line is we had revenue that came in from that tax increase that instead of using in the for the schools, for raises, for light bills, for textbooks, for anything, we chose to set that aside and restrict it.
Right.
So it was still there, and as long as it was just restricted, we could have used it up until the time the BG1, this board passed just a few months ago. So that money was coming into our account. It was a positive. It was an actual check for, around a little less than 600,000. But instead, we chose to spend it somewhere else. So it's not like we never had it and it wasn't there. It was added in. We just chose to subtract it out and put it somewhere else and now we know the effect of that was about $1 million loss last year in expenses. Part of that was because we restricted it and we took it out to use from expenses. We're not using it for expenses, we're using it for the new school. But the other part of that is that we had expenditures. So like we approved things, this board approved things that we felt like we need. And I stand behind the things that we approved. Like, one of the things we approved was the SROs for the elementary. I absolutely think that was a necessary expense. But it wasn't expense, it's still a subtraction on our budget. So we have the addition when we get the tax revenues. We have the addition when we get the SEEK from the state, but then we have subtractions when we spend that money. And so, I think that that's just part of the budgeting. I think what we just need to be really careful about is understanding we can only spend the money once. And so this 4% tax increase that the taxpayers just wrote a check for, they just gave us that, from my understanding at last meeting has already been spent pretty much on reoccurring expenses and on just if you look at our budget every year, these are the expenses and these are the additional costs. So that $1 million loss that we had last year, I would assume we still have many of those expenses. They'll carry forward, they're recurring expenses. And so, like in our minds, we're like, oh gosh, we've gotten all this money. But if it's already been spent, we can't spend it again. And I think the key factor to really keep in mind is when we're looking at these numbers, and they're huge numbers, and we don't do this every day, to listen to our experts, to listen to Amy, who's our finance officer, who's done budgets since I've been here with bunches of guesses starting in January that have come out in November to be within 1% of accuracy. So that you're very good at your putting it together and kind of guessing and seeing and being conservative. And then the other thing I do think is really important to just remember, and it bears saying, the $600,000 restriction that we did was not at the recommendation of the superintendent or the finance officer. The $288,000 capital outlay restriction we did was not at the recommendation of the superintendent or the chief finance officer. This new $350,000 restriction that we just passed, a few weeks ago, was not at the recommendation of the superintendent or the chief finance officer. So we as a board are making these decisions. And I think that it's important, and the reason I'm asking the questions is not to scare people. It's literally just so that I can make sure that I have a good handle on it and that I understand where this money is coming from. Because if I don't understand where it's coming from or how it's going to be replenished, I don't know that really, just the taxpayers understand that either. So I'm not trying to be obstructionist. I'm not trying to be, fear-mongering. I'm literally just trying to understand if it's already been spent, how can we spend it again? If these are the reoccurring expenses, then how can we not pay those? If these are the unknowns with the budgeting process and with the state, then what happens? I just want to understand and have a good handle on it because you're right. We've been very fortunate in Woodford County that when we wanted SROs for elementary, we had been so fiscally responsible that we had that money set aside so that we could use it for something, that I thought was a really, honestly, one of your more brilliant ideas to add those SROs in. Because I think that with the counselors, with the social workers, with the prevention piece, you avoid tragedy, when kids are teens. You can avoid some of that. Not 100%, but that is definitely where that prevention money should be going. And I thought that was brilliant, and we've heard nothing but positives in having those SROs. So I think we have been fortunate, but I do think that at the point where we are now, when we're already dipping into contingency, when we've already spent the tax increase, when we're running the negative balance that is usually covered but may not be covered in a year or two from our general fund, we have to start kind of thinking about what that really means long term. And so, part of the reason I asked for the forum was just to kind of put those things out there so that we could discuss them, so that we would all have a plan.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to-
That's okay, because I just feel like
Yeah.
we've had a plan and then it changed. So we had a plan, no more than 28 million on the new high school. Then it went to, 30, then it was 32, then at 35 plus a couple million in cash was approved. Now it's up to around 50. I just want to understand where we're at and have a real plan, not just, well, now they're saying this, so let's just keep chasing that carrot. I mean, we're like a mule with a stick over our head and a carrot dangling, and we just keep chasing it, and I don't know that we're looking left or right or in front of us at the cliff. I just want to understand where we are so that we can.
Yeah,
I have a couple.
Let me finish one. I understand that, but would you agree that the 600,000 restricted is done?
I would agree. I think it can be. We can always unrestrict.
But-
is my understanding.
Yeah, but it's been voted on and it's done.
It has been voted on, absolutely, and the BG1 for that was a $35 million bond with a couple million, but that's been changed now. So I do think that things do change.
One hasn't been changed.
Well, the restricting the $350,000 has been changed, and that will lead to a BG1 that has to be changed.
But you would agree that, I think we're all in agreement that the 350,000 restricting that is done.
It has been restricted, but again, until it's spent, it doesn't really come off of our sheets. So that's where at least my confusion initially was, that I thought that the 600,000 could be unrestricted, that we could use that if we looked back and said, wait a minute, now that we've looked at this year, we see we're running at $1 million loss, maybe we need to talk about unrestricting that. But instead what happened was the board voted to not only restrict that with the BG1, but also to add in, some other millions of dollars of general fund. And so, but even that seems like instead of being on that path and this is where we're headed, seems like that's now changed and is now going to be around, I don't know, 50 million maybe.
That's our capacity.
That's capacity. Ms. Smith, you talk about the future and that we need to always raise taxes 4%. That's in your draft budget in January. Are you going to recommend that?
Yes, sir.
What kind of impact will that have on the budget and on the financial outlook of the district?
Well, I have.
This may be a good time,
I was gonna
Amy.
say, ran
As
some
we
numbers.
were preparing for this evening for the budget amendment, we ran some scenarios to forecast the future out 5 years. And so we think this is something that Amy and I have been working on for the last 5 days.
Let me ask you this. Did you discuss this with anybody? Any
Discussed it with Amy.
But any board members?
No.
Do you
I have
normally,
not discussed
do
it.
you normally discuss that with board members before you do something like this?
Not necessarily.
Not
No.
necessarily, but I said normally.
Again, this was our attempt to
Scott,
do a forecast
I
for,
understand that,
for
but
the
I
board.
ask you, do you normally operate like this? Do you normally make 5-year projections without speaking to anybody on the board?
Well, this is the first time that we've done a 5-year projection.
First time in your 12 years.
Yes.
And what brought that on?
Actually, last week, the board asked for some forecasting. And so, at that point, Amy and I sat down and began to work through this. And we've got 3 different models here that I think will be helpful for you. And if you don't mind, I'll go through these so it will help you explain where the numbers came from.
And it
And kinda
directly
where we-
answers your
So
And,
this
question.
is
and I
what-
think it will directly answer some of your questions. You'll see the very first one there. And what we've tried to do is put together, looking at assessments over a 5-year period. And based on the last 4 years of assessments, that was a 4% increase in assessment values over that time. So scenario 1 is a 4% increase in assessment values. It also,
I'm sorry, just, so you looked back over how many years to get to
8,
that? 8 years.
we looked at 8, now that's scenario 2 is the second page, will be the
Like-
average of the 8 years.
Okay,
This is just from the last 4 years, where we have seen some substantial increases in our assessments. So we did the first scenario on a 4% increase in the assessment values. And so you'll see the top part there, and again, this is based on, as Amy said, recommending the 4% tax rate. And so, using
Is
the,
that your recommendation also?
oh, absolutely,
Okay, but you keep saying Ms. Smith recommended that, but you recommend it too.
absolutely.
Okay, I just want to be sure you
And this is why?
Pardon?
Is this why? Does it show us why you're recommending that?
I think it will clearly show that. If you look, and it's a pretty extensive calculation to get to what the tax rate will be that will generate 4% more revenue, but the very top line is the projected tax rate out through fiscal year 2024. You'll see a 4% increase in the assessments. And so that middle section there is what you would anticipate to see in terms of our revenues. So if you look, the first column there is actually the actuals from FY19, that we generated $28.6 million in revenue. You can see our expenses. We have the $600,000 restriction. We have the capital projects that we did, which included the cooling tower and the safety glass upgrades and the lift at the high school. We had $370,000 in personnel costs, which included our step increase, plus other salary adjustments that were approved in May. We have the $320,000 for the resource officers, the $135,000, that was from when we recommended the board approved, keeping our professional development funds, our instructional resources, and also the teacher induction program, the new teacher program. The last item there is taking into account some inflation, a 1% increase just in overall cost to operate. So you'll see that our actual expenses were $29,604, which then resulted in nearly the $1 million loss.
okay, real quick, on the inflation number, how did you come to that?
That's 1% of what last year's expenditures were.
And what is the,
So the number that you see is actually, so what I did is I went back to FY, well, actually I started with 18. I added these elements that the board approved, and the difference was that $254,000 of additional expenses. Now, it's in a variety of places. It's some in transportation, some in maintenance, some in instruction, but there's going to be changes because of inflation, things increase in cost. So that's that 254, that's how that was calculated. Was directly off of the actual expenditures from 2019 compared to 18. So when
But
you look
in
at
that-
the difference.
So it actually
So
went up
it's
1%.
2018 cost, plus the costs that were added, that's the additional costs that were expended over that.
And you feel like that was a good year to be reflective?
Well, that's
Or-
actually a little less than 1%, that's why I have in parentheses that that's the actual number, but I feel like that, for to make a projection, 1% is,
Kind of
I
low.
think,
It's actually pretty
Yeah.
pretty
conservative.
low and pretty conservative.
I just
So-
wondered how you,
Yeah,
That's how, yeah.
so you kind of see, and then that shows what our deficit was. So if you look then at the total expenditures, that 29.6, if you subtract out the 600,000
How
and
many,
you subtract out the 269, then that will give you the expenditure at the top of FY20, the 28,734 on the expenditure line. That's our beginning expenditures for FY20. So we took out those one-time costs, and that then begins our beginning expenditures. So then you add in the 950, which is the 600,000 plus the 350, the 323,000, which are the recurring cost of the step increase and the salary adjustments that we made, and then your 1% inflationary increases of 276 gives you our 30 million. And I think if you looked at your budget summaries for this month, our expenditures year to date are outpacing where we were last year by about $300,000. So that's a fourth of the year. So if you project that out, you can see that it's probable that we'll be about 1.1 million in a deficit this year. And then likewise, if you take that 30,284,000, if you back out the 950, that gives you the starting expenditures for FY21. And again, add the 950. Couple of things I did want to note that we did, beginning in FY21, we did add a line item of $250,000 for potential capital projects, much like what we did last year. That is, based on our history, a pretty accurate number in terms of what we have spent on capital outlay projects. And then we also included a 1% raise. That's worth the $220,000, and I think you had recommended that, Miss Bradley, in your presentation a few weeks ago, and I know the board has discussed trying to do raises for our teachers and staff.
okay, so in understanding all of it,
Mm-hmm.
the actual income on distilled spirits for this year, and then,
I put 100%.
sure, and then
Just
how did you
guessing.
project?
2%, or it's a 4% increase each
But
year.
wasn't it a 17% increase this year?
And it could very well be again. I mean, that may
So
add,
this is,
We looked at
this
the
is a
assessment in
4%
total,
increase,
not just the steel.
increase projection on every
on
category.
total assessment.
sure, but in looking at how much it has grown in the last 5 years, the projections on how it will grow in the next 5 are conservative.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure
Right.
that,
And the property taxes may not increase by 4% either.
right,
So that would be a loss in revenue on that side. So again, we tried to do the 4% across the board. Vehicles may not increase by 4%. Utility taxes may not increase by 4%. But in order to maintain consistency, we did the 4% increase in those across the board. So what you can see then is what this does. This is a forecast of revenues and expenditures over a 5-year period, where we would be from how that would impact our end-of-year balance as well as our contingency. And so again, we're trying to put this together to give you as much information as possible. I would like to point out the future considerations that are not included in the bottom left-hand corner We don't know about the psychiatric hospital. We don't know about any unfunded mandates that may come from the state. The 2020 budget, safety bill cost. One thing to go ahead and put on your radar, our lease with Falling Springs ends in 2023. If we don't have a stadium at that point in time, there may be a possibility that the turf needs to be replaced. It'll be 12 years old at that point. That's typical for the life of that. We paid half the last time, and we did it in a lump sum because we did a 12-year lease, and we paid it all at one time, and they applied that payment toward them.
And
So
is that on our facilities plan?
it's not, because we did it as a lease payment.
Okay.
And we
But-
worked through the Chenoweths to be able to structure that. And so we were allowed to do a one-time lump sum lease payment for the full 12 years. They took that cash then and applied it toward the turf. So that was about $350,000.
So,
what's your bottom line?
I think if you look at this,
Just say it out loud. I mean, those people don't have it.
it appears that we will be in a deficit all the way through 2024.
And just to be clear, this only includes a 1% raise
Twice.
twice.
So,
And we've not had a raise in a number of years already.
Right.
so, just a minute, Ms. Bradley. Can I ask you some questions? Mr.
Sure.
So you included a 4% raise in all your projections.
A 4% increase in the assessments.
That would be brought on by maximum tax increase.
No. A 4% increase in the overall property assessments across the county.
Just because Woodford County
What about
property
the
taxes
tax
go up.
increase that Ms. Smith said?
The tax increase is a 4%, is a
Okay.
tax rate that would generate 4% additional revenue.
So when I said it was based on raising the taxes, the maximum, no. But then you just said your figures are based on raising taxes. The maximum for the next how many years?
Well, that's through 2024.
Okay. So a layperson could say that you have based a budget,
No, not a budget.
based a projection,
Of revenues and
Yeah,
expenditures.
you have done this to help the board.
We have done this so that the board would clearly understand what we are looking at as a district
But
over the next 5 years.
Clearly understand what?
The impact of the restricted dollars
Okay.
and how that
Just a
will,
minute. Thank you, sir.
impact our
Okay. So
bottom line.
we have a budget set up that if we don't, that even if we raise taxes to maximum, we're in a deficit.
Based on these projections, yes.
So what would be your recommendation if you recommend the taxes increase for the next, till 2025, you're at a deficit? So what would your recommendation be?
Well, we need additional revenue.
Okay, you've already raised it 4%.
Okay.
There isn't any more revenue unless you put it
Well,
before the voters.
I guess,
We might have to do cost.
Just a minute. Go ahead, Scott.
I think there are, there's two options.
Okay.
One is that until bonds are sold, those restricted dollars can be unrestricted.
So you're trying to go back. Let me finish, Scott. I didn't interrupt you. So this is a revisit of the board action to restrict 600 and the board action to restrict 350.
It's not a revisit. It is saying that in order to offset this deficit, that is an option that the board may consider.
What other options does the board have?
The board could choose to cut over $1 million from our budget each year.
And this is to inform the
Or-
board.
It absolutely is to inform the board.
So you mentioned, I quit counting at 3. You mentioned the 900, the 600, and the 350 at 3, and I quit counting that. What impact did the board action of restricting 600 and restricting 350, what impact did that have on the future of Woodford County schools? And your anticipation, you're bringing it up today.
Well, no, actually, I brought it up in June.
Well, you're bringing it
I
up
said
again
that,
today.
I said that there were some real risk involved. And so this is to maybe outline more clearly what those risks are.
That this is to outline more clearly the mistake the board made.
I did not say it was a mistake, sir.
Okay, what did you say?
I said that those funds have been restricted in order to offset the deficit that this district could be facing based on these
You
projections.
said will be facing.
Or based on these projections, will be facing.
Right,
There are two options.
okay.
One of those options is to cut over $1 million, or an option, because those funds have, no bonds have been sold, those funds could still be unrestricted.
Are you prepared tonight to discuss in detail, like you have this, the deficit measures to reduce the deficit?
I don't think that we are at that point yet.
Wouldn't that have been helpful to have in both scenarios?
Well, again, I think we have clearly articulated that not having those funds in the general fund will put us in a very difficult
And
situation.
you just got through saying
Mm-hmm.
you did it in June.
Mm-hmm, I did.
How many times are you going to do this?
Again, I was asked last week to try to do some forecasting.
Who asked you?
The board did.
Who on the board?
The entire board did.
Okay.
And so,
But wouldn't, and I remember that we talked about having the full picture.
right,
This is just half the picture. Right?
how's it happen?
Because that's only half of the scenario. We either have to unrestrict the 600 or make cuts. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying that is
Right.
the two choices.
Okay. When will you present the second half?
If you will we can present some potential opportunities for cuts.
I'm not talking about potential. I'm talking about your priority list.
I will present a list, and the board's decision will be to determine what needs to be cut.
If the board asks you to present a priority listing of cuts, you will not do that?
I will provide you a list.
If the board says, Mr. Superintendent, we would like a priority listing of projected cuts, you will not do that?
It will be very, very difficult.
It's a simple yes or no.
No, I want to clarify
Okay,
why I'm
sure.
saying.
Go ahead.
Because what we have prided ourselves in this district is the programs and the opportunities that we have expanded and provided for our kids. And so for me to say, I'm okay with cutting this or this or this or this as a priority, no, I'm not real comfortable doing that.
So you won't do it?
I will provide a list of all of the things that you would like to look at. In terms of saying, cut this over cut this, that's going to be very, very difficult.
I understand that. In being a superintendent, being a board member, there are difficult decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, trying to come up with funds to build a new high school, which you never mentioned, as an attribute. You act like we restricted it with nothing coming from it. But those are difficult decisions too.
They are.
You outlined for the third or fourth time, you outlined the mistakes the board made.
I never one time said it was a
Okay.
mistake, so
You-
please don't say that.
Okay, you outlined, you brought this to our attention for the third or fourth time, what could happen from the decision of the board, for the third or fourth time.
Mhm.
But when the board asked for your priority of cuts, you say you can't do it because it's too difficult.
No, I said I will provide you a list of things for me to prioritize what needs to be cut over what shouldn't be cut.
That's a board decision.
I think that is a board decision. I absolutely
You know,
believe that.
this 950,000 is a board decision.
It
And we've talked
absolutely
about
is.
the ramifications of it 3 or 4 times now.
It absolutely is.
Absolutely.
With all due respect, guys, I do think that this is the first time we've seen a forecast. Like, I think just general warnings, it could be detrimental and we have $1 million loss. is one thing, but then to actually see it forecast. And then the next page talks about if you don't do a 4%, it talks about
No,
another.
the next page is
The
an
next
8-year
page-
average
the
versus a
next
4-year
page,
average,
if you
and
wanna
it is a
look-
lot different.
That is a 2%, that's taking a 2% increase in the assessments, and again, that is going back 8 years. And looking at the proposed assessment increase based on that, you'll see that the expenditure piece doesn't change.
Right.
However, it does impact the revenues primarily because if we only have a 2% increase in assessments, it doesn't impact SEEK
Right.
as much.
That was my
And
next
that's the
question.
biggest
And I will
difference.
say that if you look at the projected contingencies with the 8-year average and the 2% increase, our contingency stays a lot healthier over the 5-term or
Yeah.
5-year term.
Yeah, it's still a deficit all the way through
And it's important to remember
2024.
that these are just projections.
Absolutely.
And
And it's a couple
it's good
different scenarios,
information to
too.
have.
Yeah.
Just a second.
Yeah.
I understand it would have been nice to have it before tonight, but it is good information to have, and obviously there's a lot here to digest and to look at. But I think it'd be interesting to look back, Amy, on the assessment average for a longer period to try and get a good sample. I know it varies so much, but looking at the second page, it just shows what a difference that assessment projection has on the final numbers. It is significant.
An 8-year average, though, is pretty extensive.
Okay, and so the SEEK, that was my next question. So the SEEK projections, you've just kind of,
There are no changes other than the assessment. I mean, there are so many moving parts
Yeah.
on the SEEK. I kept everything, our ELL numbers, our at-risk, our special, everything else I left the same.
Okay.
The only thing that changed was the assessments because, I mean, you can,
right.
you can do a lot of different
Oh,
scenarios.
absolutely. And
It's just,
again,
it's endless. So you have to kind of
absolutely.
pick
And if
something.
you change X, then Y is different too. And I understand that completely.
Those pieces will not impact a great deal on the SEEK. The add-ons, it's very minimal because the base of it,
Just so.
like the special education, EL, if those numbers go up
within the
8 or, within the
Okay.
SEEK, if they go up 8, 10 students,
Right.
it's not a substantial,
I didn't know if you were saying
No.
add-ons on.
no.
And
I- line
again,
items.
we're still running at a loss each year, with no new expenditures and not knowing
No, there are new
what.
expenditures.
We didn't, like I said,
Absolutely.
we
Well,
did
no, if we
include the
added,
capital outlay
If
and
we
the,
added a couple of counselors, no, that's not included. If
But-
Senate Bill 200 says you have to have a counselor for every, 250 students, that's not included.
Right.
So a
But
lot
there
of
are
things are
built-in
still not
assumptions.
included, whereas we do have those extra expenses year to year, but none of those are included. So if the board decided we need SROs in school, that wouldn't necessarily be included if we didn't have it. So anything, like if the psych hospital comes, that's not included.
Right. And
So
so,
it's
like I
still
said, it's a
not taking
projection.
into account,
Right.
like, any expenses that could come up. And then if you flip the page, there's another one. So this is just basic information.
Right.
It really is just forecasting.
Absolutely.
It's not advocating one thing over another. It's simply saying, this is where you are money-wise. The numbers don't lie. They're on the paper in some different scenarios. I'm not just giving you, hey, we have to do 4%. Here's the only sheet you get from me. It's got, information if you turn the next sheet, talking about if we kept the tax rate flat. So really, to me, this is kind of what I was looking for, not just a, hey, it's a bad idea, or hey, it could be harmful, or hey, we were at a loss this year, but we're not sure what's gonna happen next year, or the year after, or the year after. It's just, it's some hard numbers for us to kind of look at and evaluate, and then say, okay, well, I would prefer to see it if we had included some, a 2% raise. Or if we had included more than
Right.
a 2% raise over 5 or 6 years.
Right.
But again,
but those
that's
numbers
still
could be
just-
easily
right.
added
Right.
without,
So-
But it
the
gives us a
last
baseline.
page, just very quickly, the last page, because there had been some requests about looking at options about keeping tax rate flat and those types of things. You can see that if we were to keep the rate flat, and again, we did it for the full 5 years, you can see that basically by 2023, we would have a negative $842,000 imbalance. So,
So that does kind of let us see that future boards are gonna
Yes,
either
right.
have a
Yes,
negative.
right.
and that's the thing too.
Or
is
they're
that-
gonna be locked into this 4%.
And I think that's the reason that we wanted to project it out over a 5-year period, is that really the only year this board can control is 2021. And so anything beyond that, we are obligating someone else.
And we're also projecting, you know, we can't know if a huge corporation will choose to build in Woodford County
Correct.
and bring in a
Right.
influx of tax dollars. We can't measure that.
Right.
So it's a projection, and I appreciate that.
I will
I
say
did
though,
have one question.
just real quickly to that point, even if you look at the year like where Kroger was built, our assessments went up 5%. So,
Which is more than what we've allocated on the first one.
but
So,
the 4% over that was a 1-year increase at 5%.
So you average.
So when you do 4% over a 5-year period, that would take into account if we had a year that was really significant. So again, that's why we tried to project it out over time.
so if you were to request or to try and find a actuarial analysis, like a third party to do that, Amy, do you have any experience with that? Along the same lines, but that might be something worth looking at to see if
To
that's
just have an
of it.
audit.
Yeah,
kind
well,
of.
not an audit, and this may be something.
No, because the
We don't
audit's
deal
something
with
totally
projections.
different.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
the
right.
audit's something totally different.
I didn't know if
We
you
look
were
at the
an
past,
officer.
not.
Okay.
Yeah.
But to have some kind of,
So
kind of- like they came in and did sort of our audit of special education and kind of gave us recommendations and looked at everything from an outsider's point of view. I mean, is that possible to have someone from the outside come in and look at this? Because no other school district has built, a $35 million school using general fund. It might be interesting to have somebody come in from the outside and say, hey
Just-
guys, here's what you're looking at and here's what that means, sort of a big picture kind of a thing. I don't know if you would call it an audit,
And I
but
want to
that
be
might be
clear,
interesting.
we're not building a $35 million high school on restricted funds. That is one portion of our bonding capacity.
Well, the
Right. Just,
$600,000 is restricted, and then the 288 capital outlay that's restricted.
which is just a portion of our bonding
And
capacity, correct?
Or still.
other school districts use capital outlay. There was recently a school district that had $2 million of bonding potential if they didn't use their capital outlay. They used their capital outlay like it's one of the intended purposes.
Over 90%.
And their bonding went up to $12 million. They wouldn't have been able to do anything.
It does increase, but then you don't have that money
Right.
to do your project, so you have to depend on general fund to pay it, just like we did with the cooling tower. So the money has to come from somewhere. I mean, that's the point. Like, if you have money to spend, you can only spend it once, and if you're spending it on a building, that means you are not spending it on teachers or students or technology or within the classroom, buses, electric, whatever, we spend our money on.
Okay.
But
Back
it
to
might be
the
interesting to
question.
have.
Can you think about that and let us know, instead of putting you on the spot this evening?
I
No,
can,
I
but
just-
I mean, they're gonna
This-
use the
this is
same
complex.
formulas that we,
because there are so many moving parts,
Yeah.
and what expert is going to come in and say, okay, I think I know how many special education kids you're going to have over the next 5 years, because I don't know that you can base it on what you've had in the past. We can look at the last 25 years, and our overall attendance hasn't changed that much, but there's just a lot of variables there that it's not, it's tied to some factors that are very unique to school districts.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
the bottom
and I
line
guess I
is-
was asking if there is someone that does it
I have
for
never
us.
heard
Okay. That was
Anyone that does.
just a question that might be helpful. We all obviously need time to look over this, and
that's why we wanted to provide it to you
And-
tonight, because
yes.
you don't have to make a decision until next week on the restriction, in terms of where it's gonna be taken from. And so that's why we wanted to get it to you this evening.
Good. Go ahead.
follow-up
All right.
questions is it possible to meet with you and Ms. Smith this
Sure.
week?
Absolutely.
To go, because I'm sure the more that I sit and look, the more questions I'll have. It's not something that you can,
Yeah.
So we'll,
you're out.
part of the week for a conference, so we just need to plan.
Which days are you gone?
Half day Wednesday, all day Thursday, half day Friday.
And then too, I think it just bears saying that Amy really is an expert in her field. Like, she gets statewide awards. She is asked to do trainings for agencies. She, has a really high level of experience in education, and she is an expert on our Woodford County budget. I mean, there's no denying that. And so I appreciate having the information and having you do the projections. And then I think it does bear saying that every year that I've been here on the board, when you start in January with over half of the slides saying, we're not sure what the sequel will be, we're not sure what all of these unknowns. There's half of the slideshow is unknowns. And then you get down to the final budget when you do it and we compare the numbers, you're within 1% every single year. That's what came out in the work session, I remember. So I do think that it bears saying that if you look at someone who has the experience, who has the education, who has the knowledge, who has provided the numbers, and the numbers have been correct for a millions of dollar budget within 1%, she's doing something right. I mean, you do a great job. I just want to say that. And I do thank you for pulling all of this together, because I think it's important. And we need to know this before we do the vote next week. So
We're very fortunate, I think. All 5 of us are very fortunate to have Ms. Smith. I have complimented her more times than I can recall. The superintendent and I have been together for 12 years. I had voted on his recommendations probably 99.5% of the time, including each and every contract. But, and I respect you deeply in your role as superintendent. But unfortunately, we are on opposite ends of the issue regarding building a new high school. And I would not be doing my job if I didn't ask you questions. I don't want them to seem like they're just, I'm working as hard to get a new high school as I can, and when things like this come up that we know nothing about, and you could have easily sent this to us.
It was literally finished at 4:30.
Okay, all right, but let's don't get,
So, I mean,
all
it's-
weekend.
I know,
I mean,
let's don't
this
get,
was,
okay, let's don't get,
Well,
yeah,
and just to
okay.
clarify, I think
Wait,
we do all want a new high school.
Yeah.
We just need
But-
to make sure the numbers make
Okay,
sense and
but-
that we understand that. We're making good decisions.
but we do have to continue to ask questions about
Yes.
this projection that you just gave out. So that, but I do want people who are going to watch this on tape. Now, I have the utmost respect for you, because I've been criticized for being mean to you, and I've been criticized for asking you questions I shouldn't ask. But when you bring information up like this, we have to ask those questions. That's our role.
I understand that.
Now, you keep mentioning the 600,000 and the 350. Now, one of the options was to unrestrict that money.
That is still an option
Okay.
until bonds are sold.
Okay, but let's pretend that we follow. I don't think you're making a recommendation, because I know that we've already done it. So this is just to help educate us. But let's pretend that you or another board member makes that recommendation. How will that impact the construction of a new high school?
It would delay it.
To when?
That I can't answer. Again, if you unrestricted a portion of the money, that's an option. And if you wanted to see how that then grew over time, in terms of what it would do with our bonding, that is something that could be considered. So I think there are different things that could be considered if that were a path that the board wanted to look at. But can I give you a definite date? No.
Can you say that if the board would follow yours or another board member's recommendation to do that, that would absolutely delay the construction of a new high school for the immediate future?
Yes.
Okay, but see, that's, and then how would we build a new high school? How could we build a new high school more quickly than in the future? Because I think you
Again,
said before, without without additional revenue to our bonding, we couldn't build one for 8 or 9 years.
And again, I thought when the $600,000 was restricted, there was some conversation at that point that would lessen the amount of time that the district may have to wait in order to be able to construct a new high school. I think that is still the case. Exactly how much that lessens the time, I don't know.
But shouldn't, I mean,
But again, I think if, on the opposite side, if we continue forward immediately with this plan, I think people need to understand, I think the board needs to understand what the impact is on our budget and what that may mean to programs and services within our district.
but you have made that. I mean, there is nobody in the county cannot doubt that you've made the point that if the board continues this restriction, it's in a way that you don't find, that you think is going to be detrimental.
Well, I
But
don't
shouldn't-
think, I think.
Okay, you know.
I believe very clearly it is shown that it will be
But don't you
detrimental.
think that part of that is, when you talk about the detriment it will make to the future budget, don't you think you ought to be realistic and tell people what it will do to the direction of building a new high school in the future? Because your recommendation is going to have a...
There will be time before a new high school can be built, absolutely.
You're so specific about this, don't you think you need to be as specific as possible with how long you're saying delay?
I don't know. I can't answer that question because, again, our bonding is growing at a faster rate than it did a few years ago because interest rates have been lower. There's a lot of factors that impact what your bonding
And
will
to be
be.
fair, we're moving forward with at least a partial high school, at least the $35 million BG1 that was approved for bonding, and then the couple million extra. Like, we're moving forward with that, so I don't know that it would be appropriate for him to come up with a plan saying, no, you should just unrestrict everything and wait. I think he's just giving us the information. I don't think he has a plan here. I don't think he's saying do this, or do this. I think it's just saying this is the actual financial forecast if you're looking at a 4% increase or if you're looking at keeping things flat. Like, this is what it means the next 5 years.
We can disagree on what his plan is, but
We need to move forward.
we need to move forward. Ms. Smith, would you like to introduce the auditor?
This is Colt with Barnes and Denny.
Hi.
They have completed our audit, and he has a
Thank you.
presentation.
No problem.
Should have called on you first, brother.
No, it's all good. It was very informational tonight. I don't know if I can live up to some of the detail you guys have now. I feel like I should have put more in my slides.
Is it on?
There we go. So I do just want to start off by thanking the board for the opportunity to work with Ms. Smith and her staff. They were excellent, very good to work with, one of our better ones, to be honest with you. As you go down through here, this is just some of the general communication. Let you know that the audit was conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and governmental auditing standards. The single audit of the major federal programs was conducted in accordance with uniform guidance. As we move to the next slide here, this is just required communication. It comes up in the engagement letter and the rep letter. All it's really saying is that that the financials are the responsibility of the board. That we do perform the audit, but we don't take responsibility for those final numbers. We don't do a detailed audit, so we're not looking at every transaction. I don't think Ms. Smith wants to put up with us for more than a week than we are here. It would take to do a detailed audit. This kind of outlines some of the audit stuff. We do plan to issue a clean opinion on everything. We have not got that yet. Unfortunately, the director of the engagement had some personal issues come up with family, and he's dealing with that right now. He'll be back here in the next couple days so we can get it finalized. We do apologize for any inconveniences that it may have had. I do want to point out, though, just another part there about the cooperation from Ms. Smith. Just as a little intangible piece of the audit. You know, we request a lot of audit documentation, and the speed and timeliness and how that stuff's organized really gives us some insight on how the district's running financially and the controls and stuff that are in place. And she provides excellent assistance in all that areas. Her stuff is very tight, very timely. Everything is easy to go through, and it makes it easy on us. Just continuing to the next slide here, just outlines that there was no major audit adjustments during this. It's all small stuff, mainly related to the OPEB and pension, which we make at all our districts, and it's a very complex process. I'm sure Ms. Smith, we can go into a little bit later if you'd like. And now we're just getting out to the outline. So this is the district-wide statements. This includes everything from the general fund, the food service fund, and all those other items. The pension and OPEB liabilities are built into this slide. That's stuff that you guys can't really control. That's been a push down from GASB 68 and 75 that brings on those liabilities to the books. As you can see, the last 2 years, 2018 and 2019, when the other post-employment benefits were brought on and the decrease it's had, or increase in the liability, sorry. You go to the next slide here. This just gives you a little bit more breakdown on the district-wide net pension, or not net pension, net position, sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied tonight. Just gives you a little idea what's going on. You can see the investment capital assets is up, restricted is up, and unassigned, well, you can see where the OPEB was brought on, and the significant increase it had there in 2018.
That is an ugly slide.
It is, but unfortunately, I mean, all our districts look like this. You guys are not unique in this fact. It's just brought on by governmental standards. You're not necessarily technically liable for it, but the government wants you to show it. If you continue to the next slide there, this just breaks down the revenue and expenses over the district-wide. I know it looks a little odd, but again, this is very common on all our districts this year. In 2019, a significant decrease in revenues and both expenses. This has to do with the pension liability, the actuary assumptions changing this year. So in previous years, they used a discount rate of 4.5%. This year, it was 7.5%. So that big increase, it kind of lowered the liability for the government, thus lowering your expenses and the corresponding revenue. We move to the next slide here. This is the general fund. As you guys have already outlined, the lifeblood of the district. Seems like you guys have a very good comprehension on what this is and what's going on here. You can see assets and is down. Most of that's due to cash. You guys have already beat that up and have went into more detail than I can probably even describe. Same thing here with the revenues over expenses. You've noted the increase in expenses, and you guys have already discussed most of that earlier in the session today. If you guys do have any questions, you feel free to reach out or interrupt me at any time here. I know I'm kind of going through this a little quicker. This just gives you a detailed breakdown of the tax revenue in the general fund. As you can see, property taxes are up here from 2018 to 2019. In 2019, they're about 13.6 million. In 2018, they're about 12.9. As you go down to the next little table there, they're all fairly consistent over the years when you compare it dollar-wise to the property tax. I mean, you can see a slight increase in the distilled spirits, but not much. Going to the next slide breaks down the major sources of revenue. You can see the tax and the state revenue are fairly consistent. The on-behalfs and all that are relatively consistent to prior years. The only increase you can see there, significant increase, or I would say, is in the minor revenues there, the earnings on investments. You started with around $50,000 in 2017, and now you're up to $260,000. A lot of this is due to the interest rate you guys are receiving on those investments. The next slide here, this is the food service fund and the daycare primarily. You can see increase in both revenues and expenditures are up about $150,000 as compared to 2018 numbers. The increase is attributable to three main items: operating revenues for daycare fund increased in federal grant monies, and more donated commodities in 2019 affecting the food service fund. Lastly, as previously mentioned by another gentleman, I believe, the first speaker, we find that a lot of our districts comment on the ability to retain talent and recruit talent. The first graph there just kind of shows a breakdown of where you are compared to others your size. So 20 million to 50 million is what we classified. You guys are at the top end of this, so it looks a little skewed there. You guys are around 44 million in receipts. Most of the districts that are in comparison here are 35 or below. So take that for what it's worth. It's, it just kind of gives you an idea where you're at. You guys spent around 36 million. They're 26 million, but they're getting significant less receipts. I really want you to pay attention to that second graphic there. That gives a much better breakdown of where you guys are at. So you guys are spending 83% of receipts on salary expense and other benefits for the employees. Districts comparable size are at 82. So you're right in line. That's pretty much what that's saying. That's really all I have.
Did you say the other district sampling is statewide?
Well, it's of the districts we do. So we do around 15 to 16 districts. So that takes all the ones that are in that $20 million to $50 million receipts and kind of shows you what they are expending on salaries and benefits.
So you do 15 or 16 at the same salary range?
No, total. That's total. And then we broke that out into the ones that received 20 to 50 million. And I want to say, in this comparison right now, you're probably looking at 8 to 9 schools.
Okay.
And that you think is probably, it looks like an average and healthy amount to be spending. I know sometimes in trainings they say you can go a little higher than that.
Yeah, I mean, it never hurts to be a little higher. I mean, you guys are right in line. Like I said before, you guys are on the top end of this at 44 million in receipts. Most of the districts are 35 and below that are in this comparison. So realistically, if you probably bump that number up to districts that were 40 to 50 million, you would be right in line at 83. I don't.
And that includes the on-behalf payments.
Yes, yes. Sorry, I should have
So
mentioned that.
that's $10 million.
So going back, just a question.
No.
On the executive summary slide,
Yes, ma'am.
one of the things you have is no consultations with other independent accountants.
Yes.
Does that mean, explain that one?
Oh, so we didn't. It was all us. Like it's all our work. We're not relying on any other outside accounting
I
firms
got
to
you,
work.
okay.
Like in 2017, we would have had to rely on your previous auditor. Is pretty
Gotcha.
much what that
Okay.
like because we
So
have to
this is
rely
all
on those
your own.
beginning numbers. They've audited those. They said they're good. We had the numbers from 2018 that we looked at. We know they're good, and then this year's we
Okay.
looked at.
I just wanted to understand that.
No problem. And we can provide you any of this info you need. It is in our engagement rep letter. So.
And
Please
so
let me know.
you anticipate having your audit complete?
Here in the next couple days.
Oh.
Like I said,
Sure.
unfortunately, the
No, I
director in
completely-
charge was
I
he's
completely
dealing with some
understand.
family issues in New York, and
Sure.
hopefully he will be back. Not hopefully, he is coming back.
So we will upload the final draft, hopefully by Monday. I mean, it's anticipated by Monday for sure. And then we'll get bound copies for each of you of the final draft of the
Okay.
audit.
Yeah,
And is it possible?
Because this is just the draft.
yeah, but we don't anticipate like the changes. You're not going to see many changes from what
Sure.
you have there. It's going to be fairly consistent. I think Amy and I talked, and there might be a small change, like $25. But that and major impact, $25 out of 44 million.
Yeah.
You're not even going to notice.
Is it possible for you to email this to the board members that couldn't be here tonight?
Oh, certainly I can. If Ms. Smith wouldn't mind providing me
You
there.
don't want them to bring their bubonic plague into your office to get it, so.
We've got an electronic copy we can
Perfect.
send out to them.
And same with the projection.
The projection,
Hmm.
yes.
Thank you.
And I will say, like, you know, we have these audits every year, and, you know, it seems like, you know, it just really is a testament to the quality of Amy and her staff, and I guess Scott, and your staff too, that there's not even a tiny little correction in the end in the summaries. So central office, no reportable matters. All the activity funds, high school, middle school, elementary schools, no, not even a single matter reportable. I know when I first started, sometimes we would have like, you know, maybe somebody didn't write something in the red book or didn't give a receipt out immediately or something little small like that. But to be able to juggle and manage all those and not have really a single, you know, issue with the audit is just remarkable. I mean, it's just a testament to how the quality of the people here, Amy.
Well, we have 6 very dedicated bookkeepers who care very much about the work that they do, and I have to applaud them for the hard work and just the integrity that they have that carries into their work each and every day. We definitely do not have any slackers. They're just a great bunch.
That's
of
fantastic.
ladies.
Thank you.
Thank them
Work
for
very
us,
hard.
and yeah, thank you. It's remarkable.
Would you invite them to a board meeting one night? We'll put them first on the agenda, right after the pledge, so that we can express our gratitude to them. Would you do that for me?
I will.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of the auditor?
No, thank you.
Thank
And
you
if
so
you guys,
much.
as you look through the report, I know you probably didn't get to, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate your time.
Have a nice evening. You can have safe travels. Get home before it gets bad.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Hawkins.
All right. You'll note that we are bringing back the Governor's School for the Arts students this month. Hopefully they'll all be able to attend. And as has been tradition, we will recognize the superintendent's holiday card artwork winner and
I
present
love
them
that.
their cards.
Is it
So-
funny?
It's not funny, but the saying inside we're using for the first time is very touching.
Yeah, it's really good.
And it's uploaded to your e-meeting, the front and
Oh,
the
okay.
inside,
It's
so you
very
can
sweet.
pull it up. They did a really good job, just that you should do.
And then we'll have a presentation from the high school as well as student performance. So, if you look at the consent agenda, you'll notice we do have several donations. Most are monetary. We did have a donation of a tractor to the high school for our
Exciting.
agriculture students to work on. So we're excited about that. Fundraisers, just a few this month. Most of those are yearbooks. Our K-Kids are helping with the Kiwanis Pancake Breakfast, high school community activism, and the bass fishing. Travel request, just a few. I would make mention of the high school chamber orchestra. That is actually for next fall, and going to Disney to do a soundtrack. So that's kind of a neat opportunity for our students. So, but all the rest of them are, you got a baseball trip and academic team trip. We do have one hardship application this month that we would recommend for your approval. We also have a student, we're recommending shortened school day based on the ARC committee recommendation. 3 non-resident contracts, I believe, Mr. Wells, is that right? And then, as has been our tradition on, we work with the city on transporting the Kentucky State University band down here for the Christmas parade. As far as the action items, you have the notification of personnel matters. That's everything that's occurred since our October board meeting. Payment of bills. October 21st, we'll need to do that separate as Ms. Richardson was absent, and then the 28th, all were in attendance. Item E is the budget amendment for the restriction of the additional $350,000, and that will be determining where we want those funds transferred from. 3 options would be either to take it from our end of year cash balance, which would reduce that, and again, that's part of why we presented that information, so you would be able to see the impact on that. Take it from the contingency, or you could make some cuts. And then item F is the to approve the acceptance of the audit report.
What did you say about the item above that? The restricted, you said something.
Just to determine what fund the restricted money is coming from, is what he said.
Let's get that out.
And you expect us to do that without, I mean, your explain that first. Because there's 2 other people not here, so I can explain to them what you mean.
Well, we can either make the transfer from the end of year balance. You can make the transfer from the contingency, or you could make cuts that would equal $350,000, so that those savings then could be transferred.
Do you have a recommendation?
There's really not a good option. I think cuts at this point in time would be extremely difficult because you're almost to the middle of the year.
Okay.
And some of those programs have already expended some of the funds.
Okay.
But again, I think that would be obviously a board decision in terms of where you believe it would be best to do that from.
But we'll ask you for a recommendation that evening. Okay. I think it's important that we do that. Okay, we'll go back to the discussion items on A, KEA training for board members. Mr. Hawkins.
Just 1 second. I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
wondered, can you explain on the shortened school day, just kind of, how does that look for a kid that gets that? Is it less time in the classroom, or do they miss like specials, or does it depend on where they're at?
That's very individualized based on the student's day
That may be
per
one where you
medical
wanna
documentation.
talk with her individually
I just-
afterwards, so we don't have to.
Not about that particular student. I just meant
It's typically
whether
a doctor recommends a shortened day,
Yeah.
and then that recommendation is taken through the ARC committee. But, because it will be different depending on where the student is, what level they
Yeah,
are.
that's what I,
But it's always based on a doctor recommendation,
Okay,
in
I just
terms of
wanted
the
to-
shortened school day.
And I think you gotta be careful, you don't wanna get too specific.
Oh, no, I
wasn't
Somebody
asking.
could
Right.
identify,
I was just
oh, I
asking.
need to
Right.
do
No worries about
process
that.
at lunchtime or that kind of thing.
No,
Yeah, I
it's
wasn't
just
asking
very
that. I was like, what is the
individualized, and it's based
process?
on doctor recommendation.
Yeah.
And that is, Mr. Hawkins is correct, that is all I can share.
Sure, no, I was not inquiring about this specific student. I just meant, how does it work district-wide?
At all?
Yeah.
Mr. Hawkins, KEA training for board members.
I've spoken with Mr. Brim and Ms. Jones as they kind of help lead our professional development opportunities. I think there are maybe 1 or 2 items that we could offer potentially for the entire community, if that would be something the board would want to desire. The other trainings are very specific in terms of their professional development, and those would be school level decisions. It's not something that could be mandated. And so if the board wants us to look at potentially offering those, one, we were thinking to begin with one. If that was something they want us to look at, then we could certainly do that.
Sounds great. So the board and the community would go to this?
Or it could be the board, community staff, and I mean, because if it's board only, then you've got to work through KSBA and KDE, otherwise it may not be approved as far as training hours. But if it was something, and I think we were looking at maybe that poverty simulation
Oh, that would be
as
awesome.
one that we could do and just have it in one of the schools in an evening and just open it up to anybody that may want to come.
I think it would be helpful to set a date for the data meeting Monday when we have other people here. I think it would be appropriate to do the naming right. Is there any objection to that?
I've got Jimmy's calendar if we need it to do it.
I think he meant Debbie and Allison's.
No objections to putting that off until Monday?
Nope.
Naming rights for the new high school committee, I think that report should be done next week. Are any objections to that?
No.
Item D, the community forum, I know it's scheduled for the 21st. There's no way in the world, in my personal opinion, we'll be ready for that. There's too many unknowns, and I would suggest moving it to the first of the year after the holidays. Any objections to that?
I do object to that.
Okay.
I think we've been talking about the new high school, and we have the BG1 approved. I just really think that at some point there has to be some community involvement, and we have to get the information out there.
I agree with that, but
But
we're
I
not,
don't- Yeah.
I don't think we're prepared right now, and I know that we all talk about transparency, and we all talk about public input, and we all talk about telling everybody what they need, you know, what they should hear, and there's just no way we'll be ready by November 21st.
Well, I think Ms. Smith did a presentation that's actually on our site that kind of goes through, it's the presentation. And then we could add or
No,
take
we
away
need much
things.
more than that, I believe. We need more. We need to talk about the high school, we need to talk about, you know,
I will say, we just wrapped up some of our work with the steering committee, and one of the things that the community members said was going into the holidays, you know, we had talked about doing a forum with the design specifics for the new high school, and that it would be nice if we could combine the two to
Well-
be on one date. Just coming as feedback from that committee.
And I do understand that, but I think those are probably two separate things. But to have, you guys, I think, had a scheduled forum to talk about the design, and the steering committee had something scheduled. So if you guys went ahead and did that,
It's
that
not
would be.
scheduled yet.
It had been scheduled, I guess, down at the city hall. Did
No,
that
that
get
was our
canceled?
meeting. That was just a regular meeting.
Well,
All
my
of our
understanding
meetings are
was
at City
that
Hall.
the community, the steering committee had scheduled some community forums. But if not, that's okay. But I mean, I do think
Yeah.
that's a separate kind of process. But I would say that I think probably the more that we have community forums, the better. And
Oh,
we can
absolutely.
have one and then have another one after the first of the year, to incorporate and include steering committee
Well, I think
meetings.
the superintendent's got his message out. I mean, he put it up on the website, he talked about it this evening. I think that there's no ifs, ands, or buts about the funding options. I mean, the superintendent's interpretation of that.
Well,
I
and the
think,
forum wasn't just for that. Like, if you looked at, like, when I made the motion for the forum, what I wanted to talk about was, and the number one option is what we've approved. So it's not to undermine that or undercut that. It's to explain where we are and then explain the different options about if we, now that we have this new restriction, what that means for another option. But they're all kind of listed, and then just kind of, I just think we have to get some community buy-in. We have to get the information out there to the community.
absolutely, and I think the
And-
superintendent's doing a very good job of getting the information out about.
We've not had a single forum, not a single forum.
No,
I don't
no.
understand why we wouldn't just, if this is already scheduled.
Okay, if there are three board members who want to put this on the agenda for Monday night to have it on the 21st, I'm fine with that. Speaking for one board member, we are not ready.
Well, I think it's already been voted on and scheduled at this point. So, I mean, I do think that we could go into that, and then
I
if
don't
there
think
is
it's been-
more additional information.
It hasn't been voted on.
It has been. I
Well,
made
It
a,
has not been
yeah, I
voted.
made a motion that we have the forum, and then we set a date, and then it got postponed, and then we set another day, and this is the second day.
But what would be the harm in doing it when we could talk about everything?
Well, I think we can talk about everything, but then I think if we want to do more than one forum, that would be ideal. I just think the more times we go to the community and have their input, the better. And I think that we already have the state scheduled. It doesn't make sense to cancel it again.
We disagree on that. We agree on 99%, but
We
we
do.
disagree on that. We'll put on the agenda for Monday night, and then we'll.
But I don't think there would be nearly enough time to do advertising if the board doesn't make a decision until the 18th, if it was going to be held on the 21st.
Yeah.
We're not ready on the 21st, Scott.
I'm not saying, I'm just
Yeah.
saying if you were gonna make a decision on the 18th,
And the,
I don't think it would be feasible to do it on the 21st.
and the date has already been set. So we set that at Simmons on the 21st at 6:30, and I think the date's even been advertised. There's a
No.
video. We can go back and look at it.
No, because I was
So-
tasked with contacting Hilliard Lyons after that meeting.
And they said
To
that they were
see.
Yeah.
fine to attend that date. So I
But
do
that was
think.
done by email.
I do think it's
After.
important that once we had the date and Hilliard Lyons could attend, that there was no real reason to move that date. And again, I don't know that waiting till the 18th to try to say we're gonna do it on the 21st makes sense. I think the date's already out there, and we just need to go ahead with the
Mr.
forum.
Hawkins, has the date been advertised?
We haven't done any formal advertising at this point in time. It would just be what people would have gotten through that, from the last board meeting.
That it was a possibility and that we were confirming after that board meeting. Right.
I mean, I think the date was established, you were gonna check to see if there was an issue, and
I said
to
I
my
didn't care if
knowledge,
she
there
attended.
wasn't an issue with, after you reached
Sure.
out to
Yeah, I
Hilliard
was
Lyons,
just
so.
saying that it was tentative upon Hilliard Lyons being there, because I think Debbie felt very strongly about them being there.
And I felt strongly that we should have it regardless if she could be there or have a representative there. I just feel like at this point, we have already agreed to a forum, we voted to have a forum, we had a forum set, it got postponed. We had a forum presentation that's been ready to go twice that hasn't been heard, and now we're talking about canceling the 21st day. I don't see, I'm not sure what that's about.
What's the forum agenda, Mr. Hawkins?
I think it's on the sample flyer that I sent out, it was to present the funding options for a new high school, and Ms. Smith had worked extremely hard on
What?
putting together that information, and
I reviewed that information briefly, but what were the funding options for the new high school?
One is the current with the $600,000.
Okay, which
And
we've already voted on.
288. Yeah,
Okay.
it's to clearly explain
Right.
what that means
Okay,
and what all that does. Option 2 was updated with the additional $350,000 of restricted money. Option 3 was the nickel. Option 4 was to do, I think, a minor renovation, and option 5 was to wait.
And then it just talks about the history and our tax history and capital outlay and just basic information that
But
would
that
not
was,
change.
those options, I believe, were what the board discussed in
Yeah,
terms of
those were
putting.
what Ms. Springate had requested.
And so, I mean, Amy just put together the documents. The cabinet reviewed those. We felt like that they were accurate, and so that's what we had prepared for the October meeting to review.
So it seems like, just sitting here, Mr. Wilson feels like we need to discuss it on Monday. Ms. Springate feels like we don't. There can't possibly be a consensus tonight with.
what, so
We've
you're,
already had the vote, so we don't really need.
okay, but let's just talk it out. The town forum will be Ms. Smith reading the, document that you posted on the website.
I think providing the history
That's on the
information
website.
and going through each of the funding options. I think part of any kind of forum is it gives an opportunity for people to ask clarifying questions.
Of who?
Of who?
Yeah.
I'm assuming it would be Ms. Smith, the board, anybody that
superintendent?
would. Pardon?
Superintendent?
I guess if I'm asked a specific question,
Okay.
but primarily it would be Amy, I think, and the board answering questions.
I would really, I understand that you disagree, but I would really advocate for having the information from the steering committee and about the new high school presented at the forum. I think it's important to keep the goal in mind when we look at these things, and I think it's important information. And I mean, we've seen, as you've explained, how hard it is to get something scheduled at this time of year just for the board. I am not sure it's realistic to try and squeeze 2 in, and it may be better to combine them.
And again, I just respectfully would say that there's no need to try to squeeze in the steering committee report or steering committee forum in the context of this.
I
You know,
think
when
it's
we make
equally
the
important.
motion, it's equally, and it may even be more important, but it's a separate thing and it can be done separately. So I do think that this forum specifically was to look at the short-term and long-term consequences, to look at the plan we have in place right now, the BG1 that we've approved, and then to just kind of discuss that so that the community understands why we went one direction over another. They understand what this means consequence-wise, short-term and long-term. And then we get community information. We get the community able to have input. This is their school. It is the
And that's
school
why
for the
I'm-
people of Woodford County. And I'm not sure why blocking or now saying, you know, let's postpone this forum again makes sense. We have the information, it's been out there for months that Amy put together. We all did it as a board. Nobody met privately with Amy or with Mr. Hawkins to discuss any of it. It was all done in a session, a work session, so that we could come up with that document. Everybody had input on it. We voted to have the forum, then it got canceled, then we set a new date. And so I think we just need to start advertising that date and have the forum. If we want to have another forum that goes over the steering committee report that just came out, that would be great. I mean, I think the more forums we have, the more public input we have, the more information we share, the more transparent the process is. And I do believe that there can be no harm in getting out and sharing information and getting input and having, you know, the community become involved in this. Up till now, this has been going on since January, basically. And it's changed and it's changed, and we've had different things happen. We've had different directions. We've had different, you know, amounts. We've had
meetings
different,
that are available too.
all sorts. Not all of them were open. Some of them were done in different kinds of settings and in context of interviewing You know, and all of that has been done, and we're moving forward. But at this point, it's been almost a year now. Like, we really need to have our first community forum to kind of discuss this. It is huge for the community. It is a school that will be here for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years. I think, respectfully, we've already set the date. We've already approved having the forum. There is no reason to now postpone that again.
Mr. Hawkins, did we vote on the date?
I don't think that there was an official action taken. I think that everybody kind of looked at calendars and came up with November 21st.
I think, I don't want to say any more tonight, but I will make a major statement next week about all this. I'm not going to say anything else about tonight. I'm just not going to say anything. I'll hold my thoughts until next week.
So what are we doing with this?
I say we put it on the agenda for Monday night. It won't take you long, Mr. Hawkins, to spread the word. Do you think?
I think it will, with only 2 to 3 days notice, I think that would be.
Have you talked to anybody about this? Have you mentioned this to anybody about having a forum and coming and joining?
Have I invited people?
Have
No.
you mentioned it to anybody? I mean,
If anybody's asked me,
okay.
some people have asked me, are we going to have a forum? And I said, right now it is scheduled for the 21st. Now, I don't know how many people that's been, but I have been asked by a few.
Do you think it would be helpful to combine the two options?
I think they're two very different topics.
The new high school funding and the new high school?
I think the new high school, the design and things like that, I think is very different in terms of looking at the funding options and things like that. I just see them as, I think they're equally important.
No, I didn't mean that. I wasn't.
And I think each one should really have its own standalone opportunity.
And I do think that it's an exciting time, but I do think that it's only fair for people to have the opportunity to, you know, attend forums, to be able to be involved at some level, even if it's after the fact, but to have things explained to them, because it's a huge expenditure. $50 million is a lot of money. And so I think that it's important to have all that information in one place, presented to the community, in a context of short-term and long-term, of pros and cons, of this is where we are, this is what we voted for, this is the direction we're moving in. But I also think it would be very exciting to have a community forum about what the steering committee has done. I appreciate all the work they've put into this, the meetings they've attended. And I would absolutely appreciate an update to the board regardless of when the forum's going to be scheduled or not.
For next week.
But I would love to have an update, just to be able to kind of, you know, see what's kind of going on. But I absolutely respect all the hard work and effort that's gone into the meetings and the people that volunteer for that committee.
It's unfortunate that Debbie isn't here, since she was kind of charged with coordinating with Amy and with Hilliard Lyons for the forum, and her weighing in would be helpful.
And again, I think all the documents have
I think all the
we've gone
documents.
all over all that. The whole full board has had input on that. That was done in open session here. And they've been available for review for weeks now. The changes that were implemented with the raising of the budget with the additional restriction have been included. You know, I just am not clear on why we would delay and not do that when everything's been decided and available and discussed by all the board members, and questions, opportunities for input, opportunities to add or subtract or change have all been provided. But I definitely don't think there's any possible way to do a forum if we decide that we're going to keep the date on the 18th for the 21st. I just don't think that's fair to the public at all, or really to the superintendent and his staff, to be able to kind of save the date, but we're not sure.
I would agree, if a decision is not made until Monday, then I would think that it needs to wait until after the after the holidays, because I don't think it would be possible to really have.
The dates are
Yeah.
tough at this point.
Right
for
now,
all
the
of
date
us.
is fine. Like right now, I think you sent out a flyer that showed, you know,
We
what
haven't
you
sent
kind
anything, I
to
sent it
us,
out.
to the board
Yes.
to review. So the board has had ample opportunity to review the flyer, make additions or corrections or suggestions, and that could go out, you know, tonight, tomorrow morning. So all that could happen, and we would be fine to hold this on the 21st. But that really does need to be decided probably now, that we will keep the date and honor the date that,
You know, like I said, I'm not gonna say much else tonight, but I'm not naive. But I will make a major statement on this Monday night. But I'm not naive. So you're saying that Ms. Smith at the town forum is gonna talk about the document you prepared,
I didn't prepare that,
the document that you put on the website?
correct.
Okay, she's gonna talk about that. People will ask questions about that document. Now, what else you have planned?
That was all that it was scheduled to be about. Now, we were gonna have them, provide, check a box, which option they might prefer.
But we've already
And then-
done all this, haven't we?
I thought that was
we're gonna
part of what
change
the
it to
discussion.
update the new $50 million school instead of just the partial school we were gonna
So is the
update.
purpose for the board to change their mind?
The purpose was to allow the community to give you feedback.
For the
And-
purpose of?
That's the board's decision to determine how they want to look at the feedback. And, but I mean, I think that was part of that discussion too, was to allow people to say, this is the option we prefer, or to write comments on the back of a card and be able to share those.
And the purpose being? To change our decision?
No, I didn't say
The
that.
board has changed our decision since then.
No, but I'm asking Scott.
I'm not advocating for that. I do think the community deserves an opportunity to give you their opinion.
Oh, I don't think
About
that's
this.
in question, for sure.
And
I
that's
just think
what-
it's a matter of,
That's what this is for.
sure, and I think Mr. Wilson's question is, are we prepared to do that accurately? And,
For instance, I would assume from the information that you're going to supply, that the obvious question will be, well, when can we do the high school? If we follow your plan and don't do the high school, I think the question will be, when can we do it? I ask you that, you can't answer it.
I can't.
Well, I don't think
No, time out.
it's planned.
But can't you anticipate that would be a question?
It certainly could be a question.
Okay.
Not all questions have a definite answer. And this is one of those. I can't tell you it will be built in 2025 or 2028 or 2024. I can't make that. I can't make that determination.
But you can say with finality, if we follow your plan, it won't be there.
With finality
That it will not be
it will
built
not be
anytime.
built. It will not be built immediately.
Okay, so if we take your plan, it won't be built, but you can't say when it will be built.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, and I think our plan at this point is option one, which, or maybe option two now.
It is
Well, it's
option one was the
Because we
current.
already approved the BG1, that is our plan.
Okay. You don't look at me. I'm telling you, I think it's a bad idea to do it on the 21st. Not because it's public
It's not.
opinion.
It's not my decision.
So you want to have a meeting where Ms. Smith presents your plan for, let me finish. Ms. Smith presents the plan that you submitted to the community. That plan, right?
What
And
plan
you're-
are you talking about?
The one that you put on the website.
That's not a plan.
It's
What
all
is
the
it?
options.
It is the information. What is capital
Okay,
outlay?
all right,
What is
stop.
general fund?
Stop.
It gives them information about everything that plays into this, and then it explains the different options.
All right, but I just want to know, she's going to talk about those options. Are you going to include this, your 5-year plan?
I
No?
think that's up to the board to determine if they want that included as information that needs to be
But
shared.
right now, she's going to present that plan. People will be able to give feedback on that plan. That information
on the different options.
That's on there.
That is another consideration. The fact that 2 of the 5 board members have not seen the first 5-year projection that we have.
Well, we're not including that, we're just doing.
But it would make sense to be included.
Absolutely.
So, I'm just saying, it's part of the big picture, and we need, I don't know. I agree that we have to be transparent. I agree that public involvement is the right thing, but I don't want to do it in half measures that don't help.
And again, this has been planned for months now, and
We just-
information
I
has been
understand that.
available.
Yeah,
for-
we're just keep
The
talking
information,
about.
I mean, you can look at the date it was put on the site, you can look at the date we had the meetings here, you can look at the date whenever it was
What date is
approved
put on the
to
site?
have,
I didn't put it on the site, but it was communicated
It was-
from the steering
it was
committee.
our
Mr. Hawkins,
planning meeting,
Mr. Hawkins,
our planning meeting, I'm
Mr.
sure.
Hawkins,
But you can look at those dates and see this has been going on for months and months and months.
okay.
And everybody had input into the document, so I don't understand why we wouldn't have a community forum. It makes no sense.
No, nobody's
It's just-
saying that. We're saying postpone it until we can have all the information regarding this subject.
It's
You know,
hard.
I'm not gonna argue with you and Mr. Hawkins about this. I mean, if you want, Mr. Hawkins, if you want to poll Ms. Richardson and Ms. Edlin, if they want to continue with the 21st, Ms. Springate wants to continue with the 21st, then do that. And if they say yes, is that legal?
No, not
Okay.
really.
All right, what do you suggest?
He just needs to know tonight if we
I
want to do it
just
or not.
Want to know what you all want us to do.
And I'll say again, with 2 board members having strong opinions that are in contrast to each other, and without there being enough board members present to vote,
There are enough board members present to vote. We can vote right now.
but
Gotta have 3 votes.
you have to have 3 votes.
Correct, and if
So
you
you're
don't,
gonna
then it
vote one
defaults to the prior, no?
No, well,
I tell you what, have a community forum, let Ms. Smith let her present your information. The information,
Don't, just,
I'm not, and then we'll go from there.
I mean,
We'll do it on the 21st.
you've said multiple times that this is my information. And Ms. Smith put the document together. We reviewed it.
Okay.
And it's accurate, and so,
Nobody said it's not accurate.
but to say that it's mine, and you've said that on multiple occasions,
Scott,
it's not.
okay, you sent around the proposed announcement. Do you have any changes? Right? You sent that to us before you distributed it, before you posted it. But the facts that you keep referring to, you didn't ask anybody if it should be posted, you just posted it.
You had asked previously that any item, any information that was attached to an agenda item be posted on the website, and we did that.
Ms. Bradley, you have any objection to Amy presenting her information on the 21st?
my objections are noted. I don't want to do this in half measures. I do appreciate the 5-year projection. I think that should be included. I think it's valuable information. I think that it's the first time the board is seeing this, and it has direct impact on everything involving Woodford County Schools and this restriction or that restriction, and 2 board members haven't seen it. So yes, I guess I do feel like that should be included, and I would be more comfortable having a meeting and letting all board members weigh in.
And with all due respect, we have had a meeting. It was tonight.
And we
All board
didn't have
members could
this-
be present.
Then we
All
should
board
vote,
members
Sherry.
could have this document. It's available. Amy is going to put it out. And again, if you look at the 2019 information, all of that is just information we've received over and over, month after month after month. All of that is financial information of our expenditures, our tax increase, our rate. All of that is just information, kind of a summary of this year, and then it just shows that $1 million loss at the bottom. So none of that is new information.
All
The
of it.
projection, no, the 2019 is actually
All right,
happened.
all right. the board can, by majority vote, can change it Monday night. If it's scheduled for the 21st, Ms. Smith's going to present the information that she shared with us already, and that's it.
So you're saying we should go ahead and advertise?
I'm just asking, we don't
you're
even know
asking.
what, I'm just asking what the town
Okay.
forum's going to be about.
And again, I'm kind of at a loss because Ms. Bradley's asking that this be included, you're saying
And,
it should
I
be
mean, surely
included.
you agree that,
I'm not asking anything, I'm just asking what the town forum, what's the agenda, what are we going to talk about?
and what moves this forward in the best way for our community?
That's all I'm asking.
I don't know, postponing and canceling.
Just, I'm
moving
asking,
forward.
I'm asking what's going to be included.
And again, I think the board has to make the determination on what will be included. Is it just the information that has been posted on the website? Does it include this? I don't know, because there are two different opinions as it relates to that.
And
So,
without Ms. Edlin, who was charged with determining the format and working with Ms. Smith,
And with
to
all due
review.
respect, we did do that at an open meeting.
No, we
We all
did
had
have this
input as to
information.
what should be included. And what is included, if you look on Ms. Smith's presentation, you know, is that you would likely have to do a 4% increase. So this just puts numbers, forecasts that out 5 years. You know, it's not a new document, it's not a new amount of information. That's what's included as pros and cons on those lists. And again, it's not Mr. Hawkins or me asking for a certain option. It's literally explaining the pros and the cons, the short-term and long-term consequences of each different way.
I understand that, I
And
understand
then
what you're
providing
saying.
some history and context and some specific information and
I
numbers.
understand that, but it sounds like to me what we're going to talk about is that document. And
I mean, I would be comfortable with that, yes.
And Scott, you said we really don't know what we're going to talk about. The board needs to decide that on Monday.
I don't think it can be decided tonight, because
Okay,
I don't think there's gonna be 3 votes. And so if
all right.
If it can't be decided until Monday, I would respectfully ask that it be moved to a date after the first of the year, because I do not believe that is short notice. I mean, that is too short a notice. And I would respectfully ask that the 2 different subjects be kept separate, because I do
the
think.
steering committee,
Yes.
but not the 5-year projection.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, let me ask
That's
you,
fair.
let me ask you this, because I'm trying to get to where you want to be. What about if we advertise Monday night at the high school for the meeting, that Ms. Smith's going to be reviewing that document in public, and if anybody would like to come listen to it, they can come.
I think 2 days' notice is not.
No, it's not 2 days' notice, today's Monday.
You talking about it just at the meeting?
Yeah. I'm trying to get to the point to where,
Well, I don't think a meeting generally there's not a whole lot of exchange. And so I think a forum has a specific purpose in terms of,
No, I think I think there was a miscommunication.
Yeah.
He was saying, were you saying Ms. Smith could do her presentation at the board meeting on Monday? Or
Yes.
you, oh, then I
yeah,
misunderstood.
yeah, just let her get the information out. Because this is information driven, and it isn't that the purpose of the public forum is to give out information?
It is, but it's also to get information. So
Okay.
when you have a forum, like you're with the public, they can talk. You know, if you're at a planning meeting, nobody out here can get up and talk. Nobody can deviate from the agenda. Nobody can have input. Nobody can ask questions that can be answered. It's just a whole different, to me, it's a whole different thing. A forum is to get community input. A forum is to share information with the community. A forum is to build consensus and let them understand where we are and how we got here and have some buy-in.
Okay.
To me, that's what the forum is. It's not for the purpose of sabotaging or undermining.
No.
It's not for the purpose of saying, now, this is our plan, the number 1 option that we're doing, we've approved it, but we want to try to slide in there and torpedo it. It's not that at all.
I didn't think that was the plan. What I
Okay,
thought,
good, because I'm the one that brought up the idea of the forum. Like, that was literally at my request. And
Absolutely.
I did not do it in a way
no, and I agree.
with any kind of intent
I agree
to
that the
undermine.
community needs to clearly understand the impact that board decisions have. And they need to understand the plan. They need to understand the consequences of the plan. They need to understand all of that. But I think if it could all to come together as one, it would be helpful. You understand what I'm saying, Mr. Hawkins?
I think Mr. Hawkins has respectfully asked that if we want to include this, we postpone the forum. I definitely want to include,
And if the vote can't be determined
Right.
until Monday, so, I mean,
Okay.
it's just too late, I think, at that point.
and I think, I want to understand this. And,
We would be happy to sit down with you and,
right, and this is not, like, just like you said, you have pure intents in wanting to schedule it. I want to make sure we convey all of the information that we can when we do have it in the best way that we can. And I think this has, I think it
Sherry,
has
could I-
merit, and
Could I ask you a question?
Yes, but let me just respond to that. And again, you can have more than one forum. So we could have a forum and go over all the presentation that Amy has done, and then we can have another forum after the first of the year and include any new or updated information. But yes,
What about, instead of waiting until the first of the year, just move it back a couple weeks until we can be better prepared? That meets your goals too, doesn't it?
I don't know how we could be any better prepared. The presentation's out there, we all went over it.
I
I
understand.
understand that now there's a forecast, and you could say, well, let's cancel the meeting because we're gonna do a 10-year forecast. Oh, wait a minute, let's cancel that meeting, we're trying to do a 15-year forecast. Like, I think the information is all included. What this would mean for future boards to set taxes, what this would mean, if it would, the pros and the cons are all listed. Now, that it was a 4-year plan, no. That it was a 6-year plan, no. That specific information on this is not included, the specific numbers, but absolutely it's included as a pro and a con if that locks future boards into doing, a 4% increase or
I understand
that sort of thing.
what you're saying.
That's
I'm not
already in,
dis- I'm
let's
not-
take action.
Yeah, what do you suggest, Mr. Hawkins? I mean, we can go ahead on the 21st and include the information.
And
that
I
this-
am telling you, to move this forward, I'm requesting that we vote on the information that
All
is
right.
presented in the forum on Monday.
Okay,
Because we can sit here and talk this until everyone is past their bedtime.
and we probably already have, so.
Yeah, so that's,
we'll move that last thing, Scott, to, yeah, you know what I'm trying to say, yeah. No, just not the, yeah, just this last one. The approval. Ms. Hawkins. Mr. Hawkins, you have anything for us?
I do not.
Ms. Springate?
Yes, I would just say that today's Veterans Day, and I would just take a moment to really thank all of the veterans in our community and their families. That's it.
Ms. Bradley?
I would say that, again, with today being Veterans Day, I had the chance to go to Southside, and the Veterans Day program was fantastic. It is moving and awesome, and the sacrifice that our veterans have given for all of us to be able to sit here and hotly debate things, and for our kids to go to school, and for all of the other things that we have in our country. I'm very grateful, and for your family's sacrifice.
Yeah.
Grateful, and it's noted.
Sherry's family has sacrificed
Absolutely.
beyond sacrifice.
Absolutely.
And I do appreciate that family service.
And
I'm sorry.
just, Miss Spears is here, and if you would thank everyone. It's a hard work. They do a slideshow with every kid can submit a picture from their family of a veteran, and it is just fantastic. It's a ton of work, I know, and it's very much appreciated. I think the community loves it. Thank you for that. And then the only other thing I would have is, have we decided, I have gotten 2 letters from KSBA about the banner. Has that been assigned?
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, we take care of that as soon as it comes in.
I figured. I just thought I would throw it out there since I got another one in the mail.
Got it?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Smith, you won't forget to bring your team to the meeting. Schedule that so we can thank them. Every year, to Ms. Springate's point, every year we get a fantastic audit. I think he was kind of taken back by our debate tonight, so he was kind of off his game. But usually they point out, not all school districts have this. Not all school districts do like this. So thank you and your staff for a job well done. I'll have more to say next week. Motion to adjourn
So moved.
by Ms. Springate, second.
Second.
By Ms. Bradley. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Motion carries.